We're going to have a play with moving from different places. So where we start the movement from and how that can feel different where we start the movement from someone else. So we're going to play with where we start from our spine, from the tailbone, from the crown of the head and from the centre of our spine. You cannot do this wrong. It's really just an invitation to feel that it can be different. And actually it's about giving yourself that scope of there's some new movement, new connection to be found from moving from a different place, okay? When we come into it much more mindfully and slowly and feely. So we're going to have all our habits and all our things that we tend to do, but when we slow down, we can give the body that scope of, there's a different way, maybe you quite like this and you might want to do it more often, okay? So we're going to come down onto all fours and just take your time kind of settling onto your knees, onto your hands. You can tuck your toes if that feels better. You can do it on your elbows, but I'd suggest you did it with little blocks under your hands, like a yoga block under your hands if your wrists don't like being here as much, okay? And then take a moment to settle onto your hands and your knees. Take a couple of breaths, a good sigh out, and if there's any obvious tension you notice that can simply by noticing you can let go, then go for it. Don't go looking to try and make everything perfect, but sometimes I come here and I'm like, oh gosh, you could make it easier being on your all fours here, Caroline. Okay, and then the movement we're going to do is a cat-cow. So if I just show you to begin with, we're going to go through cat, through to cow. Okay, so you might want to start just doing this movement to begin with. Just let your spine move, okay? Without lots of direction, without going into the thinking brain about how am I doing this, just let yourself move. And that in itself is completely valid and a lovely thing to do. And then this is where we might start getting a bit curious, okay? So how would it feel if your tailbone led this? So let your tailbone find the beginning of the movement and keep going with the tailbone. So if the tailbone's doing a whole lot, then it's working up through the rest of your spine to finally bring the curve in with the head because it's been driven by the tailbone, and then uncurling from the tailbone first. So generally when we start to go in like this, we'll slow it down and we'll feel our way. So I would really, really invite you to slow this down as much as you can to play with the movement. So let's go from the tailbone again. Now, often the head wants to get involved quite quickly. So all our thinking stuff's up there. So can you really, really let the head be the afterthought from the tailbone making the movement. You might be going slower than this, you might still be uncurling from one or curling into one, but when you come to begin the next cat stretch, how would it feel if you started the movement from your centre? So a good place to think about that is belly button. So there's a centre, maybe the kind of the back of the waist, the lower ribs, back of the lower ribs being drawn up towards the ceiling, and the tailbone and the crown of the head responding from there. And then the centre of the body lowers the other way. It often feels to me like it's being just gently drawn with gravity and extending outwards to the opposite ends of the spine. And go with that again. So it might feel different. It might feel nicer, it might feel not as nice, it might feel weirder, just different. Just kind of feel, okay, what is it like when I move from there? So for me, I tend to be less pushy with my arms, which I know can be overly pushy. I sometimes forget about my head in this one. And then the next one, how would it go to go from the crown of the head? So this is the most challenging one for me. find this really challenging because I can be so head driven, it often feels like my head is quite literally disconnected from my body. That's why I'm going so slow here. And then coming out, leading with the head. But what I do know when I do it with here, I get much more of an upward lift and extension at the top of my body, and my second one always feels so much more spacious, the most spacious one of all when I lead with the crown of my head. And this isn't about how it looks. There's no right or wrong, so just really feel, well, what is the difference for you? And often it's not, well, I'd rather do that one, but it's like this one when I come in my head, I'm like, oh, I get this new movement round my chest, round my throat, and that feels really nice. Feels like to have my head up quite literally feels lovely. And then you might settle back into a child's pose from there, sink the hips back, and just gently extend the hands out. Okay, you might have your hands open. It might feel nice to come up to a little kind of onto fingertips. And then we're going to move from here back from child's pose towards a little bit more than all fours, to be honest. Okay, so I'm going to place my hands out. I quite like that feeling of there's the grounds and there's where I'm moving to. And how would it be if we started from the bottom of our body? We push the shins, the feet into the floor, getting the legs moving, and the tailbone starts to come forward. So there's a sense of moving from the tailbone over the hands, and the tailbone still making the movement happen. And then the tailbone's being drawn back to the heels. Okay, you might find, like me, actually I need a little bit more space if I'm going to do that. So the hands come forward more. And again, what's it like when you go from the bottom of the body there, that sense of the feet or the shins pressing down, the tailbone being drawn forward towards the hands. It's still tailbone coming forward, 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 and then I'm going to extend my spine from my tailbone, and then the tailbone draws me back, like it's got a wee magnet pulling it back towards my heels. And then say move from centre, from belly button, you might think, like the belly button's pulling up, and feeling the curve, the extension through to the legs and through to the arms, and the belly button's coming forward. So we think about our belly button being our centre, it's where we were attached in the womb. So there is a real kind of growing out within ourselves from the belly button. And maybe you can play with that as you do this movement, almost folding over the belly button, feeling it moving through space, and feeling it coming forward as we extend out through the legs, through the front of the body, from the belly button. And then the last one we want to do, which I'm going to slow right down here, is how does it feel if we move from the crown of our head? So a sense of the crown of the head being drawn towards the hands, bringing the rest of the body with us, and the crown of the head reaching forward in space, and then the crown of the head softening back towards the legs, the back of the movement, tucking in maybe, to then be drawn forward. I often think with the crown of the head for me, it's like I'm kind of peering out, oh, okay, what's out there? And the crown of the head starts the movement coming back. And then it would probably be nice to give the wrists a little shake after that. Okay. And then we could do one more final movement, coming to stand down. And we might want to just give the legs a little shake when we get there. Give yourself some time to come upright. Take a big deep breath. Settle into your feet. Give yourself time to be here. So we've moved through our spine. We've done quite a lot of kind of real internal movement from there. So give your spine time to settle. And again, where's your center? So often we present like this, and it's not right, wrong, it's what it is, but often it's a way of where we stabilize ourselves. And so maybe if there's a sense of here's my center, it might, for me, it kind of draws in a little bit. I'm not holding it, I'm not gripping it, bracing it, I'm just going, okay, if that's where I want to balance, it's quite far forward on my toes. How about I let my center settle and soften? Now often we avoid coming back to here. For me, it rounds my shoulders, but that's the compensation, so it doesn't look like I round my shoulders. So you just be where it might not feel as comfortable for you in terms of what you want to present or feel like you should present, but actually how does it feel to be here as yourself, just in this space where no one else is caring or looking, it's just you here. And then we might move the limbs around that. So bringing the arms up and just keeping that softness in the center, not making the outcome of where the arms reach, but letting them extend up from it, bringing them down the center. And we could do a few movements like that. So I wouldn't even say it's concentration for me. There's a real urge, particularly when I know people are watching, to go into that, oh, here's how it's supposed to look. But it just doesn't feel as connected for me. It doesn't feel like I'm steady in myself. And just notice, well, how does it feel for you if it's maybe different? This might be where you're really comfortable, but if it is different, what is it that feels different? You might ask, why is that? But more is, what is different? What's the feeling? And then this time, we could come into a fold, moving round our centre. Or you could fold forward. And then press hands into either shins or thighs. And now if you extend tailbone and crown of the head away from that centre, keeping the centre connected. And then once more you might fold over the centre. How does that feel? To finally come up, bringing the centre up with you. Letting the arms extend from the centre, connected from it, to come back to our starting point. And we might do that one more time. So a nice soft, steady centre. Breathing easy. So if you have to hold your breath to stay there, can you soften it? Fold down. And you know, maybe you bring the hands higher up. So there's a habitual for me going to my shins. What happens if I go to my thighs? Actually, I get a different sense of reach from my centre. It feels like it's more extending out at the top. And when I fold from there, I get a different sensation. Through my legs, through my shoulders, it actually feels like somehow a nicer fold for me. And then coming up from there, again, moving from the centre, bring the centre up through space. It's kind of that sense of moving through space and bringing the arms down to finish. And you might stand here, you might have your hands by your side, just where it feels a right place for you, just to take a moment just to notice and feel how you feel, what it feels